Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Himalaya, Ghana, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Jacob Deskins. He'll be here to celebrate a trip on the Tundra Explorer, and he'll be joining us from the Tundra in Alaska. Before we invite Jacob into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Chandler the Crocodile by Grace Estelle. Do you want to show the little ones in your life how to accept themselves and others? Chandler the Crocodile is a picture book that celebrates diversity, encourages self-love, and spreads kindness. Chandler has trouble fitting into his new school. His sharp teeth, long tail, and leathery skin scare his furry classmates, making him an outcast. Join Chandler's journey to embracing his gifts and making a friend. Get Chandler the Crocodile today in hardcover or softcover at Amazon. Join us right now from Quig, Alaska. Our guest today is here to celebrate his debut middle grade novel. It's called A Trip on the Tundra Explorer. Please welcome to the show, Jacob Deskin. Hey, Jacob, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am wonderful. I'm really excited to speak to you not only about A Trip on the Tundra Explorer, but also to speak to you about the part of the world that you're living in, the bush of Alaska.
Yeah, it's a different world out here, and it's not like the Alaska that you see on TV, full of trees, full of mountains. Not like that at all.
Well, let's get into it. Where on the map are you, and what's it like?
So I'm basically as far as southwest as you can get, right on a river called the Kuskokwim River. And for people that know about Alaska, I'm about 100 miles west of a town called Bethel.
Wow. And so is that like right near where the Aleutian Islands begin?
I'm a little bit further south than that, and more west of that. I'm like literally right on the coast, as far west as you can get practically.
And so what are we talking about? You just jump on the interstate and get to you in an hour, or are you in one of those places that you can only reach by seaplane?
Yeah, you can. So not a seaplane, but we do have a tiny, tiny airport, and our airport is gravel. It is completely gravel road. And so basically, when I moved out here, I flew from Columbus, Ohio to Seattle to Anchorage. And during the time of COVID, it was at its height, at its peak. So I had to stay overnight in Anchorage. And then I flew from Anchorage to Bethel. And then I had to stay again overnight in Bethel because there's only 2 flights per day out to my village in Quig. And so then I flew another 100 miles from Bethel to Quig on a little tiny bush plane. And I was the only person on the flight. It was me and the captain. And I sat right next to the captain. And it was a whole experience. And I was by myself. My wife had to stay in Ohio for her brother's wedding. It was a crazy, crazy thing to do just on a whim, basically.
So that was my next question. Did you you and your wife just wake up one morning and go, let's move to, I don't know, the most remote part of the United States?
So basically what happened was I graduated college in 2020, 2019, like right in December. So right at the height of COVID, or right when everything started with COVID. So basically I had a position lined up in Ohio, and they basically took that position away due to COVID, and stuff like that. And so then I started Googling jobs all over the U.S. I didn't care. I just wanted a job. And so I went on one of those ad searching websites trying to find a job searching websites. And it said teach in rural Bush, Alaska. And I remember like it was yesterday, I leaned over to my wife and I said, "Hey, honey, what do you think about moving to Bush, Alaska?" And she said, "Absolutely not. We hate the cold. Why would we ever do that? We can barely handle the cold here." We were actively searching to get a job in California, and that fell through. And so then 3 weeks later, I was on a plane to Bush, Alaska by myself.
Wow. And I am guessing that a trip on the Tundra Explorer is based at least in part, on your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I moved out here, obviously, like I said, to be a teacher. And so when I moved out here, I had to stay in quarantine for 2 weeks. So not only did I move all the way across the country, I had no internet, obviously no phone service out here because, Verizon, all those major companies, they don't work out here. I had to get a whole new phone plan. And so the day I got out of quarantine, my principal called me and said, "Hey, this family, they really want to get to know you. You're going to be their son's teacher. He really struggles in school, so he wants to get a good rapport with you before school actually starts. So would you be interested in going out on their boat with them and going to the tundra?" And I was like, "What the heck? What in the world's the tundra? Like where is the tundra? I don't know the tundra. Does that mean there's mountains here?" Because in quarantine, you can't leave your house. You can't, I couldn't get out. I couldn't see anything. So I was really nervous, but I said yes because I moved out here for the experience. I moved out here to get to know the people here, get to know their traditions. And so I said yes. And then that's where this book came from, that first trip that I took with this family.
Wow. And this is really incredible. I love it. I'm envious of you, just kind of taking this, talk about a leap of faith.
Yeah.
You travel, I'm not sure how many, obviously thousands of miles from Columbus, Ohio. I've been to Columbus, Ohio. It's the only place I know where the kind of interstate has to swing around a soccer stadium. But to go from a city in the Midwest to a place where you really are dependent on each other. We talk a lot here on the podcast about just the value there is in being willing to be vulnerable and how we can really grow when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, not in an irresponsible way. And usually when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about going to a place where you might not be fluent in the language. You might not know anybody. But still, I'm talking about places where there's a lot of people around and resources and internet. And when you pick up the phone and say, "Can you hear me now?" someone says, "Yeah." But you went in a completely opposite direction. You went to a very, very different place where there's not a lot of people, where you would literally dependent on strangers caring for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like my whole motto since I graduated college has been being comfortable with the uncomfortable, loving the unlovable. So like what I mean by that is, at first when I first graduated college, I thought I wanted to be a missionary or go teach like overseas. Well, I know I'm still in the U.S., but really this is a different country. This is far off from what people consider the U.S. This is just a totally different environment that you have to mold yourself to. You can't expect these people to change, but you change to what their expectations are, what they do on a daily basis. And that's a really challenging thing to do coming from the lower 48 when everything's about me, look at me, look at what I'm doing. And here you just sort of take a step back and you're like, wow, what a place that this place is where everybody is so reliant on other people. When I remember one time last year, just a quick story. Last year, for the first time, they do walrus hunting, and we can get into that later. But the whole thing is, once they get a walrus, the whole village of men, they go to the shoreline and they help pull that walrus in as a community, as a togetherness sort of thing. And they work together to cut it up. And then it takes like 5 or 6 hours to cut up that one walrus. And the people that killed it, the people that, caught it, they give everything away. They don't take a single nibble for themselves. They give it all away to the community because you is more important than I here.
Fascinating. Now, tell us about the people that are your neighbors.
Yeah, they call themselves Yupik, and they speak the native tongue of Yukton. And so where I teach K1, and it's a dual language school. So I teach K1 ELA and math, and my co-teacher, who's in the same classroom as me, teaches the kids K1 in Yukton language arts, and everything here, science and social studies, that's all taught in Yukton as well, all the way up till 5th grade.
Oh. And how are you able to communicate in that language at all?
No. I know a couple words. And it's such a sweet environment when they feel like they've adopted you into their community. They give lower 48ers Yukton names. So they gave my wife and I a Yukton name last year, and it was like this big whole. It was just a beautiful thing. Like some people say like they won't give you a Yukton name unless you've been there for like 5 years, unless you've really made an impact. And that's so fulfilling to like get that Yukton name. It was just like, wow, these people really do love me. They accepted me for who I am, not who I'm not. And so that's what I really tried to do to them. Look at them who they are, not who they're not.
I love that. Accepting someone for who they are, not for who they're not. And that is, when you think about it, that is kind of what's going on here, not only in the lower 48, but in a lot of, what we call developed cultures. And I don't know how developed that is. I think the idea of accepting someone for who they are and not for who they're not is pretty advanced.
Yeah, and that's really the premise of why I wrote my book on my student, because he is not the greatest student. He had trouble writing. He had trouble reading in the 4th grade. He had lots of trouble making friends because they saw that as a disadvantage, not as an advantage. But then the kid that I met, the student that I met, the brother that I have now, that kid that I met was everything that he is not in the school. And what I mean by that, he was teaching me how to fish. He was teaching me how to hunt. He was showing my wife. He was treating me like I was his student out on the tundra. He was teaching me as if he was my guide. In my book, the name that I used for myself, I didn't want to use my own name, so I found I was Googling names online that really impacted me, and I found the name Mr. Simmons. And when I looked it up, it meant glorious protector. And I used that as sort of like Mr. Simmons is not the glorious protector on this trip. Sean is really the glorious protector on this trip. Sean is his teacher, giving back to Mr. Simmons all that Mr. Simmons gave back to him inside the classroom.
Yeah. This is going to say, I know that there are professional educators out there that would disagree vehemently with me, but I think that ideally is the best kind of relationship between student and teacher, where they're each sharing the best parts of themselves with each other.
I agree. Too many times in school, it's, the teacher is the boss. And look, you have to tell them that you're in charge. They have to know that you're in charge. But once we're outside the classroom, it's not like in the lower 48. In the lower 48, I could hide from my students. Columbus is big. Where I taught in Washington Courthouse, it's a big place. It's a small place compared to Columbus. But I never saw my kids outside the classroom, or very rarely. but there's no roads here. There's no cars here. We drive around on snow machine and four-wheel every day. So in our village is a mile long. That's it, a mile long. So I see these kids every single day, and I had to make that decision in my head. What do I want my kids to know me as? Do I want them to know me as just the teacher who tells them to do their homework, who gives them tests, who is like that? Or do I want them to see me as a person who's trying to live this life for others, who's trying to make the best out of them, get the best out of them on a day-to-day basis, even outside the classroom?
Wow. How big is you mentioned physically how big it is. It's a mile long. How many people are we talking about living in the community?
There's about 300 people, roughly 300. It sways because people are moving out, people are moving in. There's a lot of turnover in these villages. Moving from one village to another, like every 6 months, that's not uncommon.
And what would be the reason for folks to move? Is it like here, better job opportunities, or is it something else?
No, there's not. That's another sad thing. There's not a whole lot of jobs out here for the native people. So it's more so where their families are located, where their kids, their grandparents, if somebody's getting sick, they go there to help take care of them during their last leg. So it's really just a plethora of things that goes into that move.
Jacob, do we have any idea of how big the entire Yupik community is?
I don't know an exact number, but it is a very broad. The Yupik community does spread all throughout Alaska, but predominantly they're located in the southwest region. So like the lower Kuskokwim area. I don't want to botch this number, but I would say in my school district, there's roughly 28 to 30 schools in this school district, and most of them are dual language schools, Yukton First schools.
Wow. This is really fascinating. I know that people listening have absolutely no idea of what life is like. Tell us, if you would, yesterday my beautiful wife and I, she woke up and she's like, we need some more detergent and some more something else. So let's drive down to Costco, and on the way home we'll hit the pharmacy, and then we'll go to the regular supermarket. That doesn't happen in Quig.
No, not at all. So out here, there are two stores. In stores, I would use that word lightly because, in the lower 48, a store has everything you need. I would say more of these stores are like the equivalent of like a gas station. You go in for the bare minimum. You're running low on something. Oh, the gas station is right there. I don't feel like going to the store. I'll go to the gas station. That's basically what we have here, two gas station-like stores. But the problem is, when I finished my book, it was done November 17th, and the company that I worked with, they mailed it, or they shipped it out, UPS. Well, I didn't get my book until January 4th because it was stuck in the biggest town close to me, Bethel, from basically November 20th till January 4th when I got back from Christmas break. So that happens as well. I say that to say that's going on with the stores as well. If there's no planes coming out here, there's no produce going into those stores. So supply and demand is huge out here. So basically the stores are a lot different, and then the houses are a lot different because most of the houses, if not all of the houses, they don't have bathrooms. They don't have showers in the house. They don't have, they run on honey buckets. So when the honey bucket gets full, you go dump it. They use, the native word is called a maki, or steam, as we call it in the lower 48, like a steam bath, like a sauna. That's how they bathe themselves. That's how they, clean themselves. And it's a totally different thing that is very interesting and very rewarding to be able to go do, to see that. But it can be difficult. Imagine having to go to the sauna every day to help to wash yourself, to clean your kids, to, be clean. It's totally different than just hopping in the shower, taking a 3-minute shower real quick to get clean, go off to work. It's not like that. And then lastly, there's no trees here for like 100 miles. So to heat those saunas, to heat those steams, they have to travel by snow machine or by boat during the summer to go get wood to heat those saunas, to heat those steams, because there is no wood here. They have wood at the grocery store, but it's way more expensive than going off by yourself, getting it, subsistence living, getting it yourself.
Okay, now I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask a question that's going to sound incredibly rude and insensitive. So I apologize in advance, but I know there's someone out there thinking this and asking themselves, this sounds like an incredibly difficult way of life, and so why do people choose to live there?
Because when I moved, long story short, when I moved out here, I thought that I was going to go back to lower 48 after 2 years. I was going to, I signed a 2-year contract. I was going to validate that 2-year contract and then get out of here and never come back and just live my life. But there's something, it gives me goosebumps. There's something so special about a community, a togetherness, a we do thing, not an I do thing or you do thing. It's truly a we do it together. We help each other out. It's something like I've never seen in my life before. And it's to the point where I don't know if I ever want to leave Alaska. I don't know if I can feel the need to leave these people, because after 2 years, I feel like they are my family. They treat me like I don't look anything different. Sometimes when I go back to lower 48, I say, man, this is weird. And I am not the same color of skin that they are. I don't speak the same language, but they treat me like I'm their own. And we treat each other like they're our own. They're my family. They're my brothers. They're my sisters. It's just, there's something so special about that togetherness, that working together for the greater good, not for my own personal wealth, but for all of us. Wow.
I can't think of a better reason to choose to live somewhere. I think I'm not going to assume there's a bunch of different conversations I'm imagining a family can have as they're reading a trip on the Tundra Explorer together or co-reading it. What kind of conversations do you think families might be able to have?
Just the fact that we are all different, but we are all beautiful and wonderfully made in our own bodies. We don't need to, find that love from outside. If we can find that love from within, you have to love yourself first before anybody else can love you. If you don't love yourself, then that aspect is really difficult for somebody else to love you. And so being comfortable and confident in your own abilities, not in the abilities that you don't have. So with Tundra Explorer, it's all about Sean and Mr. Simmons overcoming anxiety. Like, they're both really anxious about the new school year. Sean, because he's got a brand new teacher. How is this teacher going to react to him? He really struggles at reading and writing and math, but mainly reading and writing. What is Mr. Simmons going to think of him when the first day starts and he doesn't know how to read? But vice versa, Mr. Simmons, I don't know their language. I don't know anything about this community. Where am I? What are they going to think of me coming in to a new school? Do they have expectations of me? Can I adhere to those expectations? And it really, on this trip, they go through obstacles. Their boat gets stuck. They have to climb up a cliff to get to the tundra. And they do it together. And while Amal, their grandma, Amal is the word for great grandma in this community or in the Yupik language. And she's basically the calm during the storm. She's their guide as the two, Sean and Mr. Simmons, try to, understand their anxiety and push through that anxiety for the greater good of going to the tundra to collect berries, to collect Labrador leaves, which is a real aspect of this life that they need to gather, because during the cold winter months, those berries can help them make, tea. They can make a guduk, the native ice cream. And so all those things, they work together to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just fascinated. And as I was listening to you, talking about, we have to learn how to love ourselves. To go back to something you said earlier, we have to learn to love ourselves for who we are, not for who we're not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Tell me, Jacob, where can we go to find out more about a trip on the Tundra Explorer and find out more about you?
Yeah, so I created a website. You can go to jacobdeskins.com. That's my website. It has a bunch of videos, bunch of pictures of the tundra life, what this part of Alaska is really like, couple blog posts. And then you can go to Amazon to find my book. You can go to Barnes & Noble. It's really out there worldwide. Basically, if you just search on Google A Trip on the Tundra Explorer, it'll show up.
Wow. We've had a really fascinating time speaking with the author of A Trip on the Tundra Explorer, a great middle grade novel from our guest, Jacob Deskins. Jacob, thanks so much for telling us about your book, telling us about your community, and for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. It's been a great experience.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Hope Wilder. She'll be here to celebrate Let's Decide Together and teach us what the word sociocracy is all about. Hey, if you are on social media, we would love to connect with you. You can connect with us on Facebook, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids. On Instagram, we're at Reading With Your Kids. And on Twitter, it's at Jedley Magic. And we would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the contact button at the top of the page if you want to let us know what we're doing right, if you want to let us know how we can do better, and absolutely let us know who you would like to hear on the podcast next. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Chris, I want to start by thanking our guest, Jacob Deskins. Please be sure to check out A Trip on the Tundra Explorer. Also want to thank our sponsor, Chandler the Crocodile by Grace Estelle. My team deserves a big thank you. Thank you to Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.